The cube has evolved. In Cube 2, a new batch of characters try to survive the seemingly never-ending prison of plain white rooms. But this time, reality itself is breaking down. Following up a cult hit film is always going to be challenging. So let's see how Hypercube fares. Wait a minute. Where am I? How did I get here? Who are you? Well,
I don't know, but I'm surrounded by 4 walls.
Well, okay. I was going to correct you to say technically 6, but I suppose...
There's still a floor and a ceiling.
Yeah. But I think when you're actually in a cube, though, it's actually a straight cube, then I think you could argue that walls, ceiling, and floor almost don't apply, because, you know...
Okay. Let's just start off right away with Tara's wrong.
No, I'm not starting off with Tara's wrong. But in the context of this movie, though, you're in one of these cubes. Would you say it's got 6 walls?
No, I would say it has 4 walls, a floor, and a ceiling.
But even when gravity starts to play
then
up,
one of the walls becomes a floor.
oh, okay.
Another one becomes a ceiling.
Okay. All right. I take your point. All right. Welcome, everyone. It's the Atomic Cinema Experiment. It's a science fiction movie podcast, and we're here, as it might be clear from what we just said, to talk about Cube 2 Hypercube. This is part of our number 2 season. We're doing a bunch of number 2s that we've already done the originals of. Go on, make your poop joke. Yeah, I know you want to. Yeah. For the
Bunch of stinkers for the month.
Well, there may be stinkers. I mean, we'll get into it. We'll find out. We did Tron Legacy, so that's one stinker out the way.
What? Hard disagree.
That was a hard. It was a hard number 2. Or is it worse if it's a soft number 2?
I don't know. Sound out in the comments section. Which one's worse?
Okay, enough with the poop jokes. We're here to talk about Cube 2 Hypercube. We did the original film last year. I had a great time revisiting it. Tara was a bit more critical, but I loved the original Cube. So obviously it made sense that we'd eventually come back and do 2 and Cube 0 eventually. And then apparently there's a 4th one now because Japan decided to remake the first one. So there's actually going to be a 4th Cube film at the end of this run when we eventually get back to them. But
I bet it's bloodier.
It might be. I could see it being bloodier. But yeah, we'll start spoiler free as we always do. We'll give you a warning before we get into the spoilers, and we'll get into it. Cube 2 has got a bit of a bigger budget, as you'd expect, because the first one had almost no budget. It's still, don't get me wrong, it's still a low budget movie, but this is like a Lionsgate movie. This is one that, you know, has some money behind it. It changes.
I just see the logo.
Yeah. It does change up the concept of the film a little bit. They're still waking up in a cube room that's connected to other cube rooms, but interestingly, there's no traps this time, and that's something we'll talk about. But it does play with some more science fiction-y concepts, and yeah, I'll leave it there. I don't think there's much more to say. But obviously, we've got a different group of characters, and we'll talk about them probably more in spoilers than we will in spoiler-free. But yeah, we've got a different set of characters, and that's pretty much it. That's your premise.
Was this one like a straight to DVD movie?
It does look like it, doesn't it? I don't actually know if it got a theatrical release. I'd have to double check. Without further ado, Tara, what did you think of Cube 2 Hypercube? And this was your first time viewing, if I'm right in saying that.
Correct.
Yeah. I
liked it. I probably liked it about as much as the first one. Maybe like slightly less, but like it's a fine movie. I thought it was going a bit too magic-y for a little bit, but there is science magic stuff happening that I was like, okay, you get a pass. I think it was familiar but new enough that it kept me interested because I didn't know all the rules this time like I thought I would. Some of it though was pretty predictable, which is disappointing. And overall, like, it is just kind of okay.
Yeah, I'm surprised to hear you say you like this almost as much as the first one, because I think there's a definite step down to me. They're like
I didn't love the first one.
I know you didn't, but I still expected there to be a big step down. Like, I don't hate this. Like, I think there's some nice elements to it and there's some nice ideas, but I would agree with that it's just kind of okay overall. I think there's just some baffling decisions to me. I think not having traps is a really weird choice. Making every room identically just bright white, I think, is also visually just a really weird choice.
Yeah.
I think the characters themselves, because they have to one up like the discussions and like the knowledge about what's going on from the first one, I think the characters feel a bit more forced. I think it shares kind of a similar thing where some of the acting's not that great from some of them, which we'll definitely get into as well as we're talking about more specifics. But yeah, I think ultimately, I mean, I have no problem with, like, some of the things that come into this are kind of theoretical physics, right? And I actually don't necessarily mind the idea if we're going to swap out the traps with all physics-based traps, right? But the problem, I think, is that everything in this movie feels relatively random, where it just kind of, things just happen when the movie wants them to. It's not about them trying to, it never feels like the characters in this movie have any sort of chance to even form a plan or try and solve something, because everything's just so above them in the audience. There's no way to figure anything out because it's not solvable. Whereas in the first movie, I feel like the clues that were being given and the logic the characters were using made sense, and it made sense to us. And ultimately, without getting to, just in case you've not watched the first one and you're watching this review for some reason, the ending sort of proves that it was solvable, right? Regardless of where things ended up, the ending proved that no, there was ultimately a solution to this, and they kind of, we got to that point in the story. Whereas here, it just kind of feels like, I don't know, writers...
Feels like Saw 4 or something.
Yeah, the writers are just kind of like, they just sort of put in things where they want, and then at the end it's like, and just because we decide this now, this is how it works.
I definitely felt that while watching it, where it's like, okay, things are definitely different here, so I don't know the rules yet, but the rules weren't like really being all that... They weren't being discovered like the first one, where it's like, okay, here's another rule that we figured out. There's numbers on the side of the thing. What does that mean? Instead, everything felt like it was just more random, like you said, and not as high tension. And it was a little bit like, well, yeah, that first one like seems to be that the characters are trapped in this thing, but because there are clues given to how they could escape if they're able to figure it out, working together, then okay, then there's a goal to achieve. But even in this movie, they kind of establish how do we get, like, what happens when we get out, or what's the point of this if this is all a game? Then they're like, I guess it's just to escape, but there's nothing there to lead them as to how to escape. It's just, so there's a threat coming, so run away to the next one. There's another threat coming, wait until the threat comes and then run away.
Yeah, there's no...
everything kind of feels like accidentally come across instead of like purposefully, no, we have to go this direction now because there's no clues are.
Active through line that the characters are being proactive in doing, that they're not deciding really to do anything. Everything's just reactionary, and it just kind of feels like, to the point where you keep talking about the rules and you don't understand the rules in this one, because I would argue that the first one had rules. I think this one doesn't really have rules. It kind of pretends that it does, but it's kind of just make it up whenever you want. Basically, it's like
yeah.
There's no way.
I also don't really understand the point of this cube, like the actual. Why would they build this?
Well, yeah. I mean, to be fair, we never really knew what the point of the first cube was either. That was still open for theorizing, and I feel like they try to add in some like mysterious things to sort of provoke your imagination in this, but all it does is really just kind of feel like, oh, you don't have an answer, you're just trying to like act mysterious so that it feels more mysterious, not because you actually have an answer to this as a creator of the movie, whether you're the writer, director, whatever. Honestly, one of my least favorite things about this whole movie is the ending. Like in the last like 3 minutes or whatever it is just like, you didn't know how to end this. This is how you're doing it, and this does not make me like the rest of the movie more. It just kind of makes me go, that's what this all was.
Yeah, I kind of like, I don't want to say I saw it coming, but it was one of those like, okay, we're doing this, so this is probably going to happen. And it wasn't satisfying because even though I sort of thought, well, you know, if this is the case, then this has to happen. Then, but I don't have any satisfying answers as to, well, what did this all mean? What was it for? It's just sort of like, here's a thing. Maybe cubed will tell us. Will give us an answer.
Yeah, I've got more thoughts to add on to that, but I can't really say them until spoilers, so we'll leave that there for now. But I do find the ending pretty unsatisfying, and I think part of the reason for it is not just because it's not got like that much to say or answer, but it's also because the plot line that it decides that it wants to pay off as what the real plot line was always kind of goofy, and I never really bought into it anyway. As soon as the characters started talking about it, I've got some jokes to make about it that I want to make, but that's about it. Like I was never actually buying into it as a story in the movie. So
oh yeah, there's a reveal that happens that I was like, called it, because it's a little like the clues that we get as to like who people are, like what's happening outside and how people are connected. I'm like, okay, so like this is obviously going to be somebody. And like it just feels like there's a like let's do a reveal where like it's the most unlikely thing that the audience could predict, and they're like, no, that's the most predictable thing you can do.
Yeah, but not for the right reasons though. It's only predictable because it's like, of course you're going to do this. You're going to do the most like obvious writing thing, not because it's not because they've set up the clues and the little seeds that are tantalizing, and you're like, oh, I've figured this thing out because it's all going to come together and be satisfying.
No, because it's dumb.
Yeah.
Like that would be the dumb thing to do. Like this is like, I don't know, baby's first script. Twist.
And honestly, a lot of the science fiction elements it introduces, I don't think it does enough with. I think it just kind of plays it. And even, there's a good example early on where a character starts explaining a lot of the theory of what the place could be and how the physics might work, and then you see like some examples of that play out later, and all I could think was, and I'll be more specific in spoilers, but all I could think is when it first starts to play out later, I'm like, why didn't we get some of this playing out before we got the explanation so we could be like, ooh and ah, and what's going on? Instead it starts happening, you're like, oh, this is just what the guy said, so we're just going through the motions of what was already explained. And it just wasn't exciting. Like, this was a simple, just move these two scenes around in the script and it would make one of them way more effective. And so, just simple things like that where, yeah, I do agree. I think the script is, I mean, Baby's first script sounds very harsh, but maybe it isn't far off.
More Baby's first twist.
Baby's first twist. And I don't think we can talk about the characters until we get to spoilers, because every single one of them are presented, and then very quickly it's obvious there's more to most of them than what they said, and then the movie kind of reveals things at different times about some of them. Whereas the first movie, it kind of felt like, no, pretty much what they all were at the start was all accurate. It's just that as the movie went on, they changed and they became, their true selves started to come out. And that's part of why I like the first one so much, is because it seeds kind of things, and it's sort of this exploration of like this microcosm. Like, one of the things I love so much about the first Cube, like I do with a lot of bottle stories, is that it's all set in one space and it's a microcosm of how societies, like how problems come about, and like one guy wants power, so he gets angry and he gets more violent as things start to escalate, and he wants to try and seize that power. Here, I wouldn't say this is a microcosm of anything. Everything just feels too slapdash together. There's things just kind of happening to them too frequently. There's never.
Well, they also don't have to like figure things out, so we don't get a lot of their personalities as much.
There's not a lot of like hierarchy that's formed or anything like that. They're just kind of. They all feel like they're presented here to try and like add to the mystery, as opposed to being characters who are trapped in the mystery, if that makes sense. Which can work. I'm not saying it's impossible to work, but I don't think it does in this case. I think the script is overreaching at certain points, and it almost feels a lot more hokey than the first one to me, because it tries to add these extra things onto the mystery of the cube, which I just think kind of fall flat for me and make it less interesting.
Yeah, this version of the cube that we get operates on a completely different scale than the last one. And I think because of that, I mean, there is an explanation for it, but it's a little bit more, I don't want to say magic, but like, I don't know, like the mystery isn't as exciting. Like nobody, it doesn't seem to be as much as risky. And it kind of reminds me of like I brought up Saw 4. I don't remember which Saw it was, but I remember watching one of them where like somebody's got is connect, like the rib cage is connected to a device. It's like, you got to solve the puzzle to escape, and they solve the puzzle, but then their rib cage gets pulled out anyway. So, and it's like, well, that's unsatisfying, because now you're just setting up that I'm going to watch people get tortured and without any chance for them to escape, and I don't like that. Now, it's not quite the same here, but like it's like, I'm not saying that there is no escape, but because there's no clues or anything that you're trying to get through, it kind of feels that way.
Yeah.
It feels like, okay, so they're just
it feels
trapped,
hopeless,
except for some magical explanation.
It feels hopeless most of the time, and not in a way that makes it entertaining. It never feels like they have a fighting chance, really. And
did you just turn into an angel?
Very funny, because look, the sunlight is varying up and down. Okay, like I guarantee you, by the end of the review, it'll have went down again, because it'll start getting dark by the time we're done. But right now, yes, I'm getting the beam of light. If anything, it's like I'm in the cube, because they're on these white cubes that are all just bright white light, hitting them at all times. And they've even got the main lady like in a white shirt, and I'm like, really? You couldn't have given her like another color to stick out against the background? No,
she's the plainest one.
She's got blonde hair, a white shirt, and like you're almost blending into the white background there. Like, can we just give her like a blue top or something, just to separate things a touch? I think that is one of the big problems with the movie. I don't think there's much more that I want to say in spoiler free, because so much of the movie is about revealing things and unraveling potential mysteries and setting up things and all the different various anomalies and weird I guess what's here instead of traps, the things they encounter, like those will be the things we talk about one by one in spoilers. But as for overall feelings, I think it's very much a middling, some okay ideas, but I do think it's lost all of its I think it's lost most of its charm from the first movie, and I certainly think it's lost a lot of its uniqueness, and probably as well, like I said, the actual the better writing. And well, I'm not saying the writing in the first movie was always ironclad when it came to dialogue per se. There was definitely some cheesy moments of like things that characters said. Overall, what it was doing with the characters and examining, like I say, the microcosm of the society, I think that stuff worked really well in the first one, whereas here I think it's just kind of missing, which is a shame. Which wouldn't be the end of the world if it was like thrilling, but I don't necessarily think it is either, and just like a sort of fun, adventure-y kind of survival way. So
yeah,
it's a shame. But we'll give the spoiler warning. We'll jump into things so we can talk about it more freely. And we can talk about the characters maybe first and then dive into everything else. I think trying to go through this movie in order would be a nightmare, because it's really hard to remember the sequence of events for a lot of it, because it all looks the same, like there's maybe some stuff that's obviously near the start or some stuff that's obviously near the end, but a lot of it is going to blur together. So I think talking about the characters,
introduce the characters as they appear. I mean, well, there's a couple of teases at the start. They do. Because the first movie opened with, okay, a guy wakes up and he goes into a room and he gets sliced and diced, right? He dies. And it's like you're cold open to say, hey, this is what this place is. They kind of try to do that with this, but because there's no traps, it's just this woman wakes up, and it's not the main woman, it's some woman that we don't see until much, much later in the movie. But she is like, where am I? In fact, she's not got a lot of dialogue, but there's one line in this opening scene that's really badly given. Like, this woman's woken up in a strange place. She's been drugged and she's woken up in this weird science fiction looking place. And the way she says, "Is anyone there?" like, just really made me laugh. It was a little bit like setting up, okay, this is the quality that we're going to be getting into here. Because like, I agree, like people, this is kind of like across the whole board, honestly. When people realize that they're not where they used to be, there's not very much panic.
No. And I think, to be fair to the first movie, I think the first movie had, like, I remember some of them being quite scared. You know, the teen girl in the last one was like, you know, looked distraught and was panicking about where she was. Like, here, I think there's a problem, especially with the main, so let me get the names here because there's so many of them. So the main blonde woman's named Kate. And I feel like throughout the movie, she has a lot of times where she just doesn't sound like she's, like, it feels like she's just talking calmly to people and she's taking everything very lightly in a really unnatural way sometimes, where it's like, everything's be okay, oh, that's a pretty name, and I'm like, why aren't you freaking out? And I guess there's kind of an answer, I suppose, by the end, but it really stuck out to me.
I don't know if you ever do this, but sometimes if I think something might be bad, I'll try to visualize how, like, maybe Jennifer Lawrence would do it in this role. Like, if she was in this movie and it was her first film and she's suddenly waking up and realizing she's not where she was, like, she would do she would probably flip out, and like I could see her performance. I don't know, I'm a very visual person, so I can like see somebody else with this role and do it right, and maybe that would be enough to make it better, you know, like to make it a good movie if the acting was good. But like right away, you're right, is anyone there? Like, he'd probably a lot more. You'd probably be freaking out.
You'd probably scream that. Is anyone there? Like, you'd probably be, you know, really, really panicking. I would.
You're in a room. Like, you at least go through, like, what was your last thought? Like, where was I? Like, is something, you know?
Honestly,
be a lot more shaken.
I think there's two ways to do it. You either scream that line, or you're just quiet the entire time because you're worried that if you make a noise and someone you don't want to hear you will hear you. So you're maybe just quietly trying to sneak around and see where you are. Like, one of those two options, that makes sense to me.
There'd be way more desperation.
Yeah.
There'd be a lot more shaken in the voice and in the movements, like panic. But not able to like touch things.
This opening scene ends though when she opens the door and she just gets yanked through, and that's when it cuts to the opening title sequence, right? So there's no like big like, oh, a guy got chopped into, you know, all these little pieces. It's just, oh, she get yanked out of frame. And it's like, okay, that is significantly weak as a cold open, especially compared to the first one, because the first one, you know, there was that trap with the grid, and it cut them up into all the cube-like pieces, and it was like a really big moment, and especially for a movie of its budget, where I'm like, you know what, that was a pretty okay visual effect for what it was.
Yeah, it was, and it sets up like, okay, well, obviously that person's gone, so like the people we meet there for afterwards are in a lot of danger. So when they feel like they're not in danger, it's like, well, we as the audience know that if you enter that room, you can get sliced and diced.
Yeah, like you say, it establishes a baseline in that case because it establishes the baseline of danger. And it's also establishes the mood of the movie. Whereas here, like we just joked, it establishes the baseline for the bad acting that's in the movie. It sets our expectations on that.
And that the cube is white.
And
white.
And that's the other problem is with the bright cubes, all these bright white cube rooms, is that fundamentally there's a reason why it feels moodier in the first one when they're in like a green or a blue room and it's all kind of somber. You know, there's different moods. Red feels like an angry room. But all these bright white rooms, I get that it's meant to be the stark, clinical, like, but it just inherently, everything feels like you're on like a TV set, because that's how TV sets are lit. They're lit super, you know, if you're doing like a chat show, everything's just bright white light because everything's meant to be super easy to see, it's meant to be pleasant, it's meant to be easy, and that's kind of this. It has the mood almost of like a sitcom. It doesn't really, right? Because what's happening doesn't obviously correlate to that, but the lighting almost feels of that nature to me, based on this. So I love that we started with her.
I feel very calm talking to you right now since you're surrounded in white.
Yes, of course. I have that effect on people. It's nothing to do with the light. And then we get
we have enough episodes to just prove that.
What are you talking about? I am a welcoming, comforting presence.
You shut your mouth right now.
See, you clearly are proving yourself to be the opposite with statements like that.
My room is not light.
Oh yeah, 'cause cream is a very threatening color.
Anywho.
So our next character, again, is kind of like just a quick tease character after the opening credits, is a guy with a briefcase, and he's got like handcuffs on him as well, and he's panicking. And this is really the only thing that connects it to the first movie, because you could totally just say that these movies are different, like, things. They're just different universes or different takes on the same concept. But this guy does like look for numbers around the door, and he's like, "Where's the numbers? I don't have a chance without my numbers." And it does clearly establish that this is the same universe, and this is a different type of cube from the one that was there before. So this guy clearly knows about the previous cube, understands it, maybe had a hand in building it or something, and you know he's so scared of this place that when we meet him later on, he's trying to commit suicide, and more or less succeeds, in a manner of speaking. So yeah. But which is fine. Like, you know, this idea that someone who knows about this place is like this is hopeless, I'm just going to kill myself. It is, you know, as a decent attempt at trying to build tension.
Yeah, it was a much better setup than the first one, at least, because, well, he's a better actor, but also like, oh, you've watched the first Cube, so now here's the real setting, is that this is not the same cube, and that sure, it already looks different, but like there aren't going to be any numbers this time, so you have a new riddle to figure out. But the riddle part is kind of fizzles out.
When you said the first one, you meant the first character, right? Not the first movie.
Correct.
Yeah. I'm just clarifying that, because I agree. I think this character, especially if you've seen the first movie, the fact that this character seemingly knows about that first movie almost like we do, means that he's more of a good gateway for returning audience members, because he's like, okay, this is someone who has some of the same knowledge we do as the audience, and he's freaking out because this isn't the same type of cube. That kind of tells us, oh, okay, we're raising the stakes, this is a different place, the same rules don't apply. The problem that after that I don't feel like there is that really rules that apply at all is the problem, but that's not a problem with this scene, that's just a problem with the movie as a whole.
No, exactly. Yeah. It's setting up that this is not the same cube, that there are not the same rules here, and that this guy knows something about that cube, and therefore he feels like it's hopeless. So it's a way better opening than like the first person, who didn't even really need to be in the movie.
No, it's basically just so they could pay it off later that she's the missing girl that the other guy was looking for, but I cared so little about that.
Yeah, agreed.
Which is a shame, actually, because if you told me that on paper, one of the characters in the cube is a private investigator who was hired by some girl's parents to track her down, and that led him to the cube because that's where she was put, right? So the idea of a PI coming, but it would probably be more interesting though if it was one of the characters from the first film. Like, let's say he was hired to find the teenage girl from the last movie, and he got so close to finding out the answers that whoever's in charge of the cube were like, oh, put him in, like he's getting too close, he's, you know, we need to get rid of him. Like that could have been interesting as a concept.
Sure.
But it's such a small detail here that I don't know. It just doesn't really feel like it's ever that important.
No, I agree.
Yeah. Although his character certainly goes places in its own right.
Yeah, it does.
It's almost like they're trying to do the thing with the main guy in the last one, right? So this guy's Simon, right? Is the guy in the black leather jacket. He is aggressive basically from the get-go. He kind of acts friendly enough. But his first instinct when he meets Kate at the start, because she's like the main character who wakes up after this, and we follow her through a room or two, she runs into this guy Simon, and Simon's instinct is to threaten her with the knife that he's got on him, which they've let him keep. Whoever put them in there let him keep his knife, so that's interesting. Maybe that's part of the social experiment or whatever. But when he hears other noises, and it seems like he stopped trying to attack her, his instinct, when like someone else keeps opening the doors, he grabs her and he's like, hey, don't worry, this is just for show, I'm not actually going to hurt you. And then he yells, come in here right away or she dies. And I'm like, why do you think this stranger who doesn't know her is going to feel more compelled to do what you say? I don't know. It was a weird logic to me. I mean, maybe he'll be like a good Samaritan and like want to like not let this woman die, but like I think part of he's also like, I'm not getting involved. I woke up.
Yeah, exactly. Plus, he's also stuck in this cube and he doesn't know anything that's happening.
Yeah.
So whoever well, it ends up being a younger guy,
Yeah.
who sees them. He's just like, I don't know where I am. I don't know this woman. I don't know you. Just close the door.
Yeah, so he's Max, the young guy who turns out to be from Silicon Valley. He designs video games. That's his character. We meet quite quickly a character named Jerry, who's this really friendly middle-aged guy who, it turns out, designed the doors in here. Although he didn't know he was designing them for this place. He just thought he was designing a fancy touch door because they just touch the middle of it and it opens.
Mm-hmm.
He's very upbeat. Again, it's that thing where he feels like just too casually friendly and upbeat.
Yeah.
I get that he would maybe try to be this way even when he's under more stress, but I still felt it was like just too, I don't know, he's too like just kind of like geeking out about the physics of this place, and I'm like, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me, but you know.
I mean, it's good to have different types of personalities in there.
Yeah.
But and having just this everyman family guy there to, he was one of the better characters, I thought, because he felt more realistic, even though he is very calm and upbeat throughout most of this, where he should be freaking out.
I mean, that's the big thing, is that most of these characters are not reacting appropriately to the fact that they've been kidnapped and woke up in some strange place they can't get out of.
Yes.
Which I think is something the first movie did a better job with.
Yeah. Oh, what's interesting, also, when we meet the young man, the Silicon Valley guy, he immediately closes the door and opens up another one, and it shows up in another part of the cube that our main characters are in. So it is also establishing that these rules are different, and that you may be entering another cube, but the doors, every time they close, it's instantly gone. Whatever one you were at will be the same when it opens up again.
There's moments where someone goes through a door, it closes, then they open it again and the person's gone. And in fact, when Jerry first shows up, he makes it clear that he's been traveling for quite a while, but he's only made it through the same 3 rooms over and over again. It just keeps kind of looping him because it's almost
he's got a pen on him.
Yeah, so the doors are almost like teleporters as well, where they're just taking you through sometimes to the same rooms again. And that, yeah, when Max first shows up, if you imagine you're standing in the middle of this cube, he pops up at the top, the door shuts, and then the left door opens and he pops out of that, and then that shuts, and then he pops out of the right. It's almost like whack-a-mole, where he's just kind of appearing on every side.
And it happens instantly, so it's way too quickly for something to be moving.
Yeah.
Unlike the first film.
You never see it from his perspective, but you get the impression that he's literally just at the same door and letting it close over and over again. And that's just what keeps happening. And Jerry, of course, the middle-aged guy, he's the one that gives us a lot of our science theorizing of what this place is, and indeed the hypercube and what that means in the context of this movie. Although part of that also comes from kind of the equivalent to the guy from the first movie who was disabled. We've got an old woman who's kind of went senile or whatever, and she can't remember things and she's very confused.
Seems like she has dementia.
Yeah. Mrs. Paley, but she clearly knows things from her past, before whatever her condition is, before she got sick. She clearly worked for some company that might be involved in the building of this place, and she recognizes this symbol that's on all the things. It's a tesseract, and then Jerry explains that that's also called a hypercube, and then apparently he's a nerd for all this because he starts just theorizing. We'll get into.
He's an engineer, right?
Yeah, we'll get into all that in a second. Just to finish off the characters here, we have the lady in the red dress. Julia, I think, just based on the name here in IMDb.
Yeah.
But
we went out to party.
We went into her a little bit
before.
later. She's asleep in a room. Yeah, and Max can't believe his luck. There's a hot babe. He's all excited about it. And yeah, that's that. It turns out she's a lawyer though, and she represents this company named Zion, or was that what it was called? Izon? I think it was Izon or Izon, something like that. But everything seems to sort of track back to them. They're a weapons manufacturer. the video game designer guy Max, it turns out he developed some ideas for things in a video game, and he realized at a certain point that a lot of the things they're running into were the same concepts that he was developing in his game. So, which I guess is the thing here, is in the first movie, it felt like all the characters were picked because they're different types of people, and it's like, okay, we've got someone who is a policeman, someone who's a medical professional, someone who is a genius with math, someone who... They had one person who was connected to the building of something in the structure itself, but everyone had a different set of skills. With this one, it kind of felt like everyone in some way had some small connection to what this place was.
To the company.
Yeah.
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 But no one, like the first film, no one really knew where they were, what this thing was. Like there's just, maybe the old lady would know, but she had, she's already lost her mind.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. So I guess, to get into all the stuff that they encounter, obviously we talked about the teleporting doors where you basically they just like pop out or whatever. But then eventually the idea of like there's straight up parallel universes in here, because at one point you think you're seeing the future because you see Simon's head get decapitated by this, like, it almost looks like a sort of crystal that's coming out the wall.
Yeah, it's the stuff in Superman's
yeah. It kind of looks like that. With it's kind of dodgy CG, but in a weird way, the dodgy CG of these things that happen in this hypercube kind of work in the context of it's all meant to be this like weird sci-fi physics stuff. So it's like it's okay that it looks kind of like fake.
Yeah, there's one that I didn't really like very much, although I like the idea of it, but then it becomes like kind of self-aware, and I didn't like that one very much.
I know what one you're talking about. Yeah.
I didn't like that part of it.
Yeah, so the other thing that happens with that moment,
we're
though...
missing the character also.
Wait, are we? Oh, the blind girl.
Yeah, the blind girl.
Yeah. Quite right. They encounter a blind girl after a little bit named Sasha, who... Well, she's blind. But it sounds like...
She's blind and her other senses are heightened.
Yeah, she can hear something moving around the cube that no one else can. Yeah, so they did a bit of a Daredevil thing with her. So we've got all our characters. In that moment that I was talking about where he gets decapitated and they see it through the door, he also stabs the old lady, like the other version of him. Stabs the old lady and says, "Don't trust the old woman." I cleaned it up language-wise, but that's what he said, basically. And then his head gets cut off, and they start freaking out. They finally start freaking out, which, admittedly, they should freak out about this. This is a weird thing to see. But then it's established that, okay, maybe it's not the future, but it's just a possible future. There's different version of us running around in here. And by the end of the movie, we see multiple examples of this where we like at one point, I have to bring this up. At one point, Kate goes into a room with skeletons of every like main character, and the skeletons are some of the cheapest looking props I have ever seen. It's like
it looks a little Halloween store.
It really does. It's really quite bad, and I felt bad.
It would have been greater if it was all bones, just bones and clothes.
Yeah, just dust, just like clothes with some dust in it. They've been here so long.
Because time works differently in different rooms, so that makes sense.
Well, yeah, that's one of the other concepts that comes up is there's like a cube that moves much faster. So if you're looking into that cube, it looks like someone's like teleporting, and it's like I actually didn't like it when it first started because it looked like the guy just vanished out of thin air at the door. But then when you see it again from her perspective, it's more like it's like there's like almost pauses in time where you can see him running across the room. But yeah, I don't know. It was that was a fun concept. I think see if this
because the physics are changing in a bunch of the different rooms, which is given what the cube is, it makes sense.
Which I think I would have liked a lot more if it was a lot more consistent in that, like the traps in the first movie. If like, okay, we open a door, oh shit, this is a room where the gravity's flipped the other way, and there's rooms like that in this. Or this is a room where time moves twice as fast or twice as slow. So when you're going through the door, the perspective of the two people looking at each other is going to be, either sped up or slowed down, depending. And like that sounds like fun, but it's never something that they encounter reliably. Like, they go through lots of rooms with nothing happening repeatedly, and they also never really encounter the same thing twice, I would say. You know?
There's one that comes up twice, and that is, well, other than like the spiky things coming through the wall, or the Superman thing.
Well, that's a little bit different.
One
though.
of the walls like coming towards them, like where the room's collapsing.
Yeah.
That comes up twice in the beginning.
Well, does it come out twice, or does that just... Because if I remember correctly, it comes through and starts just going through the second room. So it's kind of the same thing.
So they're just trying to outrun it.
Yeah, so that's like... So there's never really a reason why that stops, though. It feels like there's a montage of them running from this like sort of like CG wall that's coming towards them. And then eventually they just stop running and everything's fine. And they never really have a reason for why it stopped or anything. Which I guess is part of why these things all feel so inconsistent, is because a lot of them just... Like, the one that you mentioned before you didn't like, which is, like, it's basically like a cube, like a wire cube, that starts, like, mutating and, like, has more lines and more cubes, and it keeps becoming a more complex shape, and it starts spinning around, and it's basically, like, it's sharp, effectively, right? So, Jerry gets slightly injured from it, he gets his arm kind of cut, and then eventually gets killed by it. You know, it sort of chews him up, and he gets all mushed in. But it's all CG, and it's just kind of like a red cloud in the shape of like spinning lines, effectively.
But I mean, that's fine. I actually didn't mind when it started. I'm like, oh, it's going to continuously grow and expand into the room, and they have to all escape from that. Like, I thought that was okay, but then like, I don't know. You can keep explaining the scene.
Yeah, it keeps spinning. It keeps getting bigger. Jerry gets mushed up, and then there's a sort of heroic moment where Kate's like, no, I have to go back for Sasha because she's in the corner scared, and you know, she's the blind innocent one, I have to go and save her. And so it sets up, okay, Simon wanted to leave her behind, he's an asshole, Kate's maybe the hero, although it turns out at the end she's got an ulterior motive. More on that later. She goes back to get her, and this thing's spinning, it's getting bigger, and they're really up against the wall as the sharp corners that are spinning around and almost hitting them are getting close. And then Kate realizes that this thing seems to sort of slow down and stop when they're not moving. And it starts to... Eventually they just stay still, and it eventually just sort of gets smaller and smaller until it's a square, and then it disappears. And I got frustrated with this, because I'm like, okay, you gave me a reason why this one stopped, but it also just kind of started randomly. I felt like this was a really bad comparison to one of the best scenes in the first movie, which is, here's a room where the trap's triggered by sound. So we're going to sneak through it and try and be quiet. And that was great. That was nail-biting tension. And I felt like you kind of tacked on this rule that this was to do with movement right at the end of the scene to make it go away. But they were in this room talking for a while and moving around.
A while.
Yeah. So
it's almost like the cube was like, you guys have been here too long. Here's the thing.
Almost, yeah. So it just kind of feels like things happen randomly rather than because there's any reason we can, like, correlate or decide for ourselves, you know?
I like the design of this, you know, trap, especially because there's so few of them in there. But I thought initially, like, it's like getting larger and larger until eventually it'll fill up the room with knives. So you got to get the hell out of there. But then they're like, oh, it's shrinking so that it can get to us because, you know, the thing expands like a circle, but they're in a cube. So if they just stay out of the way, they won't get hit. But if it gets smaller again, then they can get hit because it can reach the corners if it's small enough. So it was almost like they were saying like, oh, it's going to try to, like, it knows where it can't reach us. So it's going to try to get us by making itself smaller. And I was confused by why that thing would have any sort of awareness.
Yeah, is it sentient? That's a great question. And if it is, why? And is that more interesting? I don't think it is. I think it just makes it feel more weird and random that if it's sentient, because like it would be one thing if all these weird anomalies that are happening, you know, the sort of CG watery wall that moves towards them, the Fortress of Solitude style crystal spikes coming out of the wall, this
Fortress of Solitude. Thank you. I was trying to remember it.
This spinning mess of shapes that cuts them. Like, if all these things, like, at the end made, like, all sort of fit together, and it's like, okay, as the hypercube is contracting, all these things are happening around the edges or something. That would be something. It'd be like, okay, then you can sort of visualize where they were at any one point, and maybe it means something, and there's some sort of logic to it. But it doesn't feel like that. It just kind of feels like they're all random. You know, it feels like the time discrepancies between other versions of people, because there's a point early on when it's running from the wall that's closing in, where you can clearly see another version of Kate watching from the door behind the wall.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, so that's going to come back up later. And I think that's the other problem, is much like a lot of time travel movies, there's so many things in the first half of this movie where it's really, really obvious that we're going to see the other side of it later, and not in like a satisfying way.
Well, I mean, yeah, it's only unsatisfying because they've already established that there's parallel universe. So are we doing a time thing, or are we doing parallel? Like, is that just another version of Kate? Not the same version of Kate, but in the future? Like, I think that's too messy to have both.
No, you're right, because in that case it did turn out to be the same version of Kate, but there's a lot of other things that turn out to be alternate versions of people.
Yes.
So it's a bit of column A and column B, which I agree probably is a bit too messy. Like, you're mixing time crimes with coherence, and I don't like. It's like, that's just, those two movies are complex enough. They don't need to be intermingled.
Yeah, too much happening.
And instead of being, because I would even say it's confusing, it just gets less interesting. You know?
Because you can't. Yeah, I agree. Because it is very clearly there are multiple versions of them, but then also there's the same version of them that's peering into themselves. So, like, it would have been more satisfying if it was all one or the other.
Yeah.
And probably more satisfying if it was all just
time travel.
Oh no, that's them at a later time. Yeah.
Or not time travel, but you know what I mean? Like, it's them later on. So we're seeing glimpses of the future or glimpses of the past or whatever. Yeah, I agree. I guess the way I'd put it is, like, it's confusing, or not, it's not confusing. It is, but it gets too complex and too messy that it just becomes dull and uninteresting because you can't really make sense of it. Unlike, say, something like Primer, where it gets confusing and you really have to think about it. But when you're watching Primer, you kind of you're like, oh no, this does all work. If we sit down and think about it, there's a method to this madness and it all actually works. I just don't buy for a second that any of this actually clicks together. It's just all just kind of, whenever the writers decide they want a type of moment to happen, it happens, and that's it.
It's just there's an out always.
Yes.
Oh, well, that was a parallel universe, or that was a parallel version of them, or something. So that's why he saw his own death.
Now, I might have enjoyed this a lot in a schlocky way if it went really deep into some of its other ideas. The idea that I'm getting at here is that Simon eventually is getting angrier and he's getting more threatening to the point where he kills the old woman. He gets hungry, and there's almost this running thing where he kills at least 3 different versions of Jerry and apparently eats them. Because he keeps getting more watch. He keeps stealing his watch.
4. I think we see 4 on one wrist, and I want to say there's a 5th one on his other wrist. Like, he ran out of room, so he has to use the other wrist.
Yeah, and this was really comical to me. I think the reason why it was so comical is
it just happens to like a switch is just flipped, and all of a sudden he's crazy.
Well, that's one reason. You're right. It is just a switch that's flipped. But the other things that really stuck out to me as making this feel silly is that, one, after he's killed a human being and eaten them with no tools other than one single knife, he has like a little bit of blood on his collar, and that's it. Like, he should be drenched in blood if he was like cutting up a human being and eating him. Like, no way.
Yeah. At least one of these cubes that he walks into should have a red floor.
Yeah. Like that one cube should just be covered in red. He should be covered in blood.
It'd be great. Someone like opens up a door, it's like, why is this room pink? It's got pink lighting.
Even after
you walk in and you're surrounded by blood.
Even after he kills the next Jerry, which is mostly just behind the door and you just hear the noises of it, like, after that he's got a little bit more blood in his hand, and I'm like, how is he doing this with like so little blood? Like, I don't believe this for a second.
Yeah, so like clearly he's meant to be the police officer in the first movie.
Yeah.
Like, we got to have a threat inside of the cube that's a human.
Except he's super threatening from the very first scene that he's in.
He is, because he's really eager to whip his knife out. But the thing with the police officer is that because you establish he's someone that on the outside you would probably trust, that you don't expect him to be the bad guy in this version. but inside the cube. So in that movie, it was a like it wasn't that it wasn't predictable, but it was saying something about society, about the people we place our trust into, you know. And in this version, in this movie, it's like, oh, the dangerous guy is the dangerous guy you expected from the beginning to be dangerous, and he just is insane now.
And I think even more than that, like the guy in the first movie, the whole point was it was revealing like who he was deep down, always. You know, it was kind of this idea that he has this like power struggle problem where he has to be in charge, and like everything comes from like
that was a
poking
good
at
part
that.
of the movie. Also, whereas this one is just like, what if I'm a cannibal? So were you always a cannibal? And the cube is like made you be a cannibal.
Like, I wouldn't mind the idea that they've been in the cube for so long, because it looks like he's like got grey hairs and stuff the last time you see him, because after she stabs him in the eye to defend herself, he shows up almost immediately with grey hair and these eye sockets like all shut up, and it's like, okay, so you've been in here for a long ass time. And I'm not against like, oh, so like this drove someone absolutely crazy, but the problem is like you say, he flipped to being crazy in what seemed like a few hours like of being in here. Because most of this movie doesn't feel like it takes place over that long of a period of time.
No.
It feels like it's going very quick until, you know, he acts like that, and then all of a sudden, oh, he's old now, and he's been in here surviving off Jerry's the whole time. That's such a
Rick and Morty line. Just like Jerry's pop out from, like, if he was just in the one cube where he had a long lifespan, and just like every other day, a Jerry pops out and he's like, here comes dinner. And then it's just a pile of dead Jerry bones. That would be so funny.
Well, that's kind of what they imply in a weird way. To the point where like that second time he kills a Jerry that I mentioned, that happens mostly behind the door. He comes in and he's like, hey buddy, who are you? I don't know where I am. Do you know where we are?
Stab.
And he just immediately pulls out his knife, and that's it. Like, okay, sorry Jerry, you're dead.
And for someone who's gotten really good at killing Jerry's, like, he's not good at killing Kate. Like, she's like way stronger than him, I guess.
Well, it turns out she's like a special ops person sent in. But okay, before we get to that, we have to talk. What was the name? Something Trusk. There was like a name that kept coming up. So early on, when they're talking about this company that might have built this cube, and they're talking about this tech. Alex Trusk, was it that?
Yeah.
And they're talking about this company that might have built the cube, and that there's this super hacker that some people think is a myth. This guy's a myth. He's just this super special guy who once took down a plane but held hostage virtually in Nevada. And I thought, this is Neil Breen you're talking about. We're talking about Neil Breen right now. He's the best at everything, apparently. But they're talking about
greatest twist ever.
But they're talking about this, right? And Max is convinced that this guy built this cube, and all I could think was, and I watched this movie a long time ago, so I didn't really remember any of the reveals, but I was just sitting going, someone's going to turn out to be this Alex.
Oh yeah, as soon as they mentioned, they're a myth, I'm like, okay, so is it Jerry because he's super nice? It's not the kid, I don't think, but it could be the blind girl, because that would be the dumbest answer. Because if it's the blind girl who ends up being the super hacker, then like no one would expect that. How could she hack if she has no eyes? She has eyes, but they don't work.
Yes, that's how being blind. I mean, I suppose you're still technically blind if you have no eyes, but usually a blind person still has eyes in there. Anywho, yeah, it turns out to be the blind girl, right? She's been the innocent one who's been in danger that everyone else needs to protect. And it turns out she's, you know, Sasha's short for Alexander, which I've never heard of that being short for Alexander in my life, but
maybe
okay.
Alexandra? Yeah, I don't know.
But very weird. But she turns out to be this super, and what gets me is that it turned out she wasn't kidnapped, is that the company, like, she didn't work for the company didn't like her as a rival. She was going to expose or whatever, right? And the company and all of the
she was
hitman
going to expose all the government and and corporate secrets,
Yes,
just like the end of Fateful Findings. She is Neil Breen.
She's going to do all this. So she chose to come into the one place that they would never dare follow her, into the cube. So that implication is that she snuck in here rather than was put in here with everyone else.
I'm assuming she immediately regretted it.
Wait, well, I don't like on paper. If that's just your starting idea for a movie, is that someone willingly went into the cube to escape the people who built the cube. That actually sounds like a fun twist at some point. But all of this, like, oh, she's a super hacker, like, and like all of the other elements of it make it feel lame. And then on top of that, apparently Kate, the main character, she's actually in here and she knows what this place is the whole time, apparently, because she was after the thing that, and they did not focus on this enough at all to make me feel like this mattered. But it turns out that Sasha, the blind girl, who turned out to be the super hacker, had, and the super mathematician, she's both, she had like a necklace with like a data chip or something, or some magical, like, because she says that she inadvertently, she gave them the key to build the place, right? That's what she says. She says that she didn't build it, but she either inadvertently or whatever gave them the key ingredient to make this place work. And this little metal thing at the end, when we see it in the case, it floats on its own, so it's like unobtainium or something. Like, she's got some magic metal that is the flux capacitor that makes this DeLorean go, right? That's what this thing is.
Yeah.
And it turns out that Kate was in here to retrieve that. That was her mission. She's been lying the whole time, which maybe explains some of like her bad reactions to things, but I don't know if that is a genuine like cover for that, or if it's just, no, it just kind of works along with that.
There was still a cannibal trying to eat her.
There
the
was,
whole time.
yes.
Yeah, this part is pretty unsatisfying because, like you said, the stuff happening outside of the cube, like the big conspiracy theory, I was less interested this time than the first movie. So, like, even like at the end when she pulls out the thing, I'm just like, I don't know what this thing is. Like, it wasn't until you explained it that I understood what that ending was.
Yeah, no, I got that part. I think for me the big problem is that they make it less interesting, even just in the dialogue, but the ending especially, where it's just like shady government people, like, did you get the thing? And she's like, yeah, and they give it to her. And then, like, she's just immediately shot in the head, and she knows it's coming. Like, she clearly knows she's about to be shot, because she's like, she knows too much. And it felt really lame to me. Like, I always hated this ending to Cube 2, because it just kind of felt like, well, you trusted her enough to go. Maybe the fact that she went in and survived the freaking cube is a good reason to keep her around as like one of your best agents. No? Is that not like logic?
Yeah, so this cube, although it's been designed, it's like a quantum cube. So like it works outside.
Like
they do the so they do the Tesseract build, which should be an impossible build, and because they're inside of this impossible build, this impossible shape, I think it is anyway. Then because they said it's a four-dimensional shape, which should really exist.
Yeah.
So because of that, the physics around it is like breaking down, and the cube is getting smaller and smaller and smaller until it like implodes in on itself.
Which was always going to happen as well. That's the other thing they say, is that this was always like counting down. Like there's this number written down everywhere from like some physicist who was in here, and it was basically someone worked out what time this is going to happen. And sure enough, It does on the watch. And you know, at the end, she just jumps into the door that goes to nowhere, and that like gets her outside this cube that's imploding. What's interesting is when you see this sort of like CG pool of liquid that was once the cube, whatever material the cube was made out of is just this like pool that they're walking through at the end. This like it's like a shallow pool that's only like an inch thick, but it's got like little waves in it, right? And it looks kind of
like mercury or something.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. It looks like mercury, but it's clearly CG, so it's got like a kind of feel to it, which is fine. Like I think it works in the context, but I realized that it's in this warehouse, and I was like, you know, this cube was actually a lot smaller than the one in the first movie had to be, because it didn't occupy space in the same way. Like, space inside the cube was kind of relative. So
Yeah.
it was like
when they think it's quantum, then you kind of assume it's like microscopic.
it feels like it was maybe the size of a football field, and that was about it. But it felt it was bigger inside it because it folded in on itself and shit and all that. Whereas in the first movie, it's a physical thing where it's all these cubes, you know.
Yeah,
so,
it's an alien thing.
Yeah.
In the first one.
Yeah, that's the other thing. I think this ending just makes it feel like a shady government or shady like corporation, and it just takes away some of the fun ambiguity of the other film. So I don't like this one. To me, this is like a tacked on sequel where I'm like, nah, I'm not counting this as canon. It just makes everything less interesting by existing.
I mean, it definitely has a lot of flaws, and I don't really like it. I also don't. I see the point in the good things in the first Cube, but I didn't enjoy my experience watching it as much as you did. But it does, like, on paper, it's a good movie. You know?
What a way you can see the point, Tara. Thank you.
On paper, it's a good movie. Execution, it's a medium movie.
That was one of the things I was saying earlier, but now that we're in spoilers, I can say this a bit more clearly, which includes spoilers for the first one, just in case for some reason you've not seen the first movie. But like I was saying at the end of the first movie, it proved that everything that they figured out was accurate. Like, there was an exit, and yeah, sure, everyone but one character was dead, but that was more because of their own stories and how they all wrapped up and like their own doing because of them breaking down. But the exit was there. It was solvable. They figured it out. It made enough sense in the context of the movie, and someone got out. And I think this ending upsets me because I'm like, what, did that character just get shot as soon as they walked out at the end? That just kind of like puts a damper on that. Like, it doesn't make it more interesting to me.
It also makes me wonder if the Ezri from the first movie gets shot when she exits the Cube, because we don't see her life after Cube.
Who from the first movie?
The one that gets out. She's Ezri Dax in Deep Space Nine.
You misremember the first movie, Tara.
I guess I do. Wait, who gets out?
There was the guy with the guy who can do all the quantum math in his head. He was the one that got out. She died.
Oh, I thought she was a mathematician.
Well, she was the mathematician, but he does like the astronomical numbers that no human being could do. He's got he's got the special kind of, you know, that trope of like, oh, the autistic person can do something super duper that no one else can.
You're right. Okay, it's coming back to me now. But she's like the second to last to.
Yeah, she basically dies right at the end, helping him get out. Yeah, she's right at Yeah,
okay. I was thinking she made it out, but now it's coming back to me now.
This is just wishful thinking because she's in Star Trek and you're hoping. It's kind of funny though how
she was the one that survived.
She's in Star Trek and the other guy's from Stargate. It's interesting as a Star Trek and a Stargate actor in that movie.
Whoa, crossover.
I know, nuts. But yeah, so I like the ending. One of the things we have not mentioned yet is how Max and the lady in the red dress, how their story wraps up. They basically have like a weird.
They were the most pointless characters in this movie.
Well,
other than the other woman that in the beginning.
Well, no, because I mean, I'm not saying this is good writing, but he did technically offer a lot of exposition that led to us understanding who the blind girl was at the end. Like, you did kind of need him for that, but their ending is basically they start having sex, but it's in like a weird time room, so they basically just have sex until they die of old age. I think. Yeah,
they're in the fast time room where everything's really fast, right? Because he's looking on the outside in when she walks into it, and she's like super sped up.
Yeah, I think
so I'm assuming when he goes in, that's where the room they have sex in.
Yeah, I think the implication is that what they don't realize is it's not just that it runs at a different time. It's that if they stay in here, is it kind of like Interstellar when they're on the other planet and like time's moving differently elsewhere? Basically, they're losing years while they're in there.
What a way to go, though.
Oh yeah, like they seem very like in the moment and just like, oh, let's just die orgasming for decades.
That's what their corpses look like anyway. They're both making a no face.
They looked happy enough. Yeah, like I feel like it was trying to make some sort of like point with like her saying like, "Oh, you're not usually my type" or whatever, and he's like, "Yeah, you neither." And then it's like, "Oh, they're just in this situation, so they're going to do this now." But I didn't really feel like I got much out of it from like a thematic sense that tied into anything else.
Nope.
Yeah. I think someone just looked at the first movie and said there wasn't enough sex appeal, so we're going to have something sexier in this one. Which notably, because they all had uniforms in the first one, they all had those like prison-looking jumpsuits, whereas here they all just show up in whatever they're wearing.
I was curious about that too, because like you said, our bad guy has a knife on him. Like, why would they leave him with a knife? Unless they want him to go crazy and maybe kill the person that they put in there in order to like infiltrate and spy.
Also, why would they even put others? Like, if the person they're after has snuck into the cube, why would they put in a full set of characters? Why not just put in the one who's going after the other character? Unless like she needs like help from the others to like maybe survive, but it's not like they know that much, really.
Or maybe they were already in there?
Like, surely she knew like a reasonable amount of everything she learned before she went in. Unless they legitimately just sent her in blind, but if so, why? Like, surely she'll do her job better.
Maybe makes you forget?
It didn't seem like it. They all seem to know who they were.
Yeah, she had a fake backstory.
Yeah, she knew to lie about it, and then she's like, she knew why she was there. And she's so dedicated to whatever this is, she let herself be killed at the end. Which, I mean, I don't even... Like, that's just not interesting to me. Like, that's not exciting because, like... And what really bummed me about the ending as well is that after they shoot her, this phone rings, right, on a desk in the background, and the guy who was, like, talking to her goes over and answers it. He's like, "Yes, sir. Yes, phase 2 is when... whatever." And I was like, okay... And so what's the extra little like exciting bit you're going to reveal in this phone call? And there's nothing else. That's pretty much the last thing you hear him say. And I'm like, why did you even have this moment with him answering the phone just to imply there's someone he answers to? Like, I mean, I could have just guessed that. Like,
yeah. I guess I was expecting him to be like, let her live or something, and he already shot her. So like, oh, this was going to be like a dark mist kind of ending or something.
Like, what they could have done, I suppose, is have another Kate walk out. And we find out the one that gets sent in was like an alternate timeline Kate that there was disposable or something. Like that could have been some sort of reveal. Like the real Kate.
Maybe she kills herself.
Yeah. That meme. Like, that meme. With,
room for only one Kate here.
No, that meme with the astronauts. You know, you not seen that meme with the astronauts pointing the gun at the back of the other astronaut? No.
No.
Yeah, it always has been. Meme? No. Okay. Some people will get that reference in the comments.
I'm too old for memes. You should know that.
Okay, the Spider-Man meme then, and them all pointing at each other. You know that one?
Yes, I know that one.
There you go. See?
Only because it was in the Spider-Verse movie.
Was it? Did they put that in there?
It's like the after credit scene.
And the new one?
No, I haven't seen the new one yet.
Oh, okay. I just don't remember it then. Fair enough. I only saw Spider-Verse the once. It was very, very good, but I only saw it once.
It was very good.
So, yeah. Honestly, this movie is kind of a mixed bag, and it's a sort of thing where, well, there might have been little moments of dialogue or acting that didn't quite add up in the first one. It was always saved by an actual good idea and good script and good tension and like a good setup. And I think it all clicked together quite well in the first movie, where it punches above its weight almost all the time. Whereas this one, I felt them trying to do all these ideas that were technically bigger than the first movie, but almost all of it just destabilized like the what made the first one work. So
yeah,
I find this one a big step down from the first one. The first one I gave like a happy 8, maybe even an 8.5. I don't remember the exact score, but
and this one you're giving a.
We'll find out after you give your score.
I'm gonna go with a 5. I think there's still some entertainment value in it, and the sci-fi stuff is kind of forgivable for like the stuff that I thought was kind of magic, and then well, it's a quantum thing, and the cube's collapsing, and the physics are different, and blah blah blah. Like I thought that stuff was like okay, sci-fi. It's gives it a pass.
This is the example. This is the example I always use for this. But this is like going from the mechanical Iron Man armor to it's just nanobots now, where it just magically appears. It's much less interesting.
Agreed, and it's visually uninteresting as well. So but there's still some entertainment value. They tried to do a thing, but it is a very unsatisfying watch, but not the worst. So yeah, I'll give it a 5.
Yeah, if I look at my old ratings for things, I think that's what I gave it in the past, and I think I'm still kind of. I think part of me thought I might like it even less now, because when I go back and revisit a movie that's not good, I tend to be even harsher on it as time goes on, because I'm like, the more bad movies you see,
vindicated for hating it.
The more bad movies to see, the more. But I still think this is actually, for whatever it's worth, it's held up as a 5, like whatever that means, like.
Yeah.
There's still like things in there that are interesting ideas. There's still some moments that are okay in their own, but I think the characters are better in the first movie. I think the social commentary is there in the first movie, where I just don't think it's here at all.
It's not existent here. Yeah.
I think the mystery is far more compelling and mysterious, I guess, in the first movie. I think the tone's better, and I think the traps are more satisfying, and it's more tense. That's a lot of things that are better in the first movie. So
agreed.
For me, this is a lot more sterile and loses a lot of the soul. So, but that said, it's not an uninteresting watch either. So I will say it's still a 5 out of 10. I'd still give it that midway mark. So
okay, we're in agreement.
Yeah, and I have been keeping track of our scores on a spreadsheet now. I've got us going all the way back to the start of 2022. So I'll fill them in.
Whoa.
I will keep track. It'll be great. So there you go.
Did we? On a side note, today's Independence Day in the U.S. Did we do the sequel to Independence Day?
We never
I just forgot about it.
We haven't done the second one. We
that would have been the best, like, number 2 to do.
It probably would have been, but I don't think either of us were ever enthusiastic about doing it. I'm sure we will eventually. There's always July 4th next year. Okay.
That's true. And that's why we're recording in the daytime, which is unusual for us, because
fireworks.
In the evening there could be way too many fireworks.
Which actually, it would be too late to do it now anyway, because it wouldn't go out for at least a few days. So, we'd had to have done it last week, and we had more important fish to fry. So yeah, Hurry Up Little Kid is up next. So look forward to that. And we will return to the Cube franchise sometime, probably later in the year for Cube Zero. We do have a couple of.
They're not bonus.
No, I think they're all worth doing as regular episodes.
Okay.
Because even though this wasn't a great movie, I think it was interesting enough.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So
I'm just worried that the quality. We have a line now.
I don't.
If that line continues,
I genuinely don't remember how I felt about Cube Zero when I saw it, so I don't know where it's going to land.
And we have a Japanese one, so the gore's got to go up.
Yeah, I don't. The Japanese remake of the first one is a wild card. I don't even know what the reception of it is. I haven't seen anyone say anything about it. It might be a nothing.
Nobody tell us.
Yeah, it might be a nothing movie. It might be a wild, almost Takashi Miike style gore fest. I have no idea.
Let's go battle royale cube style.
Yeah. Oh. There's 99 cubes, and at each cube there's one person, and they all have to kill each other.
There's a ghost. We'll see.
I don't want ghosts. No. Less of that.
Well, they do horror so well. It's the Grudge meets Cube.
Okay. So yeah, Hurry Up Little Kids next week. We got a few other second movies after that, and we do have a couple of themed seasons. We've got a couple of 5-week blocks coming up. So we were pretty decked out until end of September as far as plans go. So plenty to look forward to. Yeah. Which actually the theme, I can tell you what it is. It's post-apocalyptic movies, because it was a vote, and the vote's over on Patreon. So the patrons voted for that.
Can't believe you guys didn't go with cyberpunk.
It was either robot/AI, cyberpunk/dystopia, or post-apocalyptic, and they chose everything got votes though. Nothing got completely shut out. It was just post-apocalyptic had the most.
Okay. Going back to the 70s.
Not necessarily.
There was a lot in the 70s.
But, we'll probably do Mad Max, and that was the 70s. But it's...
Yeah.
And there's a new Mad Max out next year, so perfect time to get that started.
Furiosa.
So this is the show. Thank you very much for joining us. You can, of course, get bonus content. In fact, our most recent bonus episode just went out on Patreon. All patrons get access to the regular bonus episodes at $3 and up, which is this month we did Theodore Rex. Moment of, how do you know a shitty movie? Don't worry, I'll tell you. Anyway, so
nice.
we did that. That was our 50th bonus episode, so there's a whole back catalogue you'll get for $3 per month, with a new one coming roughly each month. And the $5 and up tier, you get access to the Ace Meltdown, which is our monthly show where we just talk about all the different random movies we've been watching for fun. So not sci-fi movies, but we'll do a sci-fi quiz to kick things off, and then we talk about whatever movies we've been watching. It's just kind of a fun catch-up movie show, and we've even been talking about video games a little bit the last few episodes, so that'll probably be a recurring thing as well, if that sounds like fun.
I haven't played any video games, but sure.
Did you just burp into the mic?
No, it's the Diet Coke's like bubbling in my esophagus or something.
Oh, that was
I got a
nice.
grump. Oh, it's still going. Oh, I think I'm hungry.
Well, either way, it doesn't matter. Like when I say that, it's just so they expect that they'll occasionally might get that. It's okay. It doesn't matter that you won't have any to talk about this month.
Yeah.
Although I've been playing a lot of Final Fantasy 16, so I have talking points. But yeah, that has been Cube 2 Hypercube. Let us know what you think of the movie in the comments.
Cube harder.
Uh-huh.
There's a lot of better tube movie titles.
They could have called it Cuboid, maybe.
Cuboid.
So it's,
The second one.
I'm just thinking, because it's a different shape, obviously.
The Tesseract.
Not enough people know what a Tesseract is now. And I feel like now, if you said that, most people think the Cosmic Cube from Marvel.
Yes. Which is just a cube.
Yeah, with magic in it.
With blue stuff. Blue lights.
It's one of the Infinity Stones or some bollocks. Anyway.
Don't spoil it.
That has been the Atomic Cinema Experiment. Thank you very much. I am aware that the last 10 minutes have mostly been fluff about us talking about future episodes, but hopefully you enjoyed Cube 2 discussion. Come back for more antics in the next week, and I will see you soon, as will Tara. I might say we. I said I instead. I apologize. Thank you very much. We'll see you next time. Keep watching science fiction and computer. Add salsa.